good? Good morning. I am Missy. This is week 5 of this parenting season series. This is the last video of this series, so confident parenting will kind of be over after this. Next week, I am back, but I'm going to give kind of a general presentation on 10 phrases to live and raise kids by, but it is all me. It's not this confident parenting series. So come or not come, I would love to have you here. I just want you to know it's a little bit separate from this. So week 5, who remembers what their homework was? I always love this part. You guys are just like high school students. So this was where I asked you to commit to one thing, kind of proactively, intentionally, one thing you were going to do differently in regards to actually building morals and values into the lives of your kids. And the 3 things we talked about last week happened to be sexuality, drugs and alcohol, and then media use. Your homework didn't have to do with that, but that was just kind of the things we had talked about. Did anybody think about this? I always like to share what I did just to give you some time to think of an answer. So we have a 22-year-old, and so I picked her brain. And I said she was a student who, in high school, she dated someone and her best friend did use alcohol. And she never did in high school. And so we just kind of picked her brain, like, what helped you make that decision for yourself? And her answer did kind of go back to something I actually changed. So not necessarily right for all families, but for us, when our kids transitioned into high school, we stopped sleepovers. Me and my husband kind of proactively had this conversation that we wanted to kiss our kids goodnight every night, helping them to make good decisions, knowing they were going to come home, knowing that we were actually going to lay eyes on them and kiss them. That was just, I should also fill you in that both of us work in high school. So there's a lot that we see. So for us, this was something we were going to do, not necessarily right for all. And so she shared with us that at first it was to make sure she didn't get in trouble. And she said the fact that you guys were going to lay eyes on me and kiss me every night made me know I am not going to do this. Eventually, though, she said that the power of making that decision is she stayed sober while her friends drank and partook in activities. And she said, I watched as they made mistake after mistake, and mistakes with dating relationships, mistakes with friendships, the way they felt the next day. And she said, eventually it became, I don't want that. Just powerful for us to reflect on that. That's not necessarily the right thing you guys commit to. But I think for us, it was a way to say, this is very important to us. We care about you, your character, the morals and values that are important to us. This is a way for us to help you. And then eventually, it bought more time for her brain development and kind of socially for her to know the whys behind that, morals and values. So now you're up. Did anybody kind of think about this? Maybe you're not doing it yet, but this is something I had in mind. Any changes? Yeah, Nicole.
We have not gone back to it, but with the older 2, we would always take that like Sunday and kind of very formally sit down and talk about the week and like things that are going well, and it was very structured, and I think so much time has gone by, and so now like we need to get back into, with our youngest, like getting into like back into a regular routine of checking in with her and kind of like, and not just with the schedule, like she runs her schedule, like with sports, she tells me where to be. But I mean, I'm talking like just those check-ins with other things. I think I've gotten away from that. Season of life is different. So I think last week, I haven't been at any of these parentings. Last week was my first one. So it just brought back like, oh, I did all these things with the other 2 that we are not necessarily doing with Carly, because I don't know why. So for me, it was like, we need to get back into doing the things that we did before. So it was kind of like a wake-up call for me personally. And maybe some of them are already embedded that we do, but more formally talking about it with Carl.
And I like that one. There was a survey District 155 did for years that I would present on called the Illinois Youth Survey. And a part of it always asked about drug and alcohol use, sexuality, some different pieces. And at the end, each kid kind of answered questions related to, do your parents talk to you about this? Do they still talk to you about it? And it was kind of parenting questions. And all the data, years and years after this, is the error that parents make. All these kids were saying, my parents haven't talked to me about this in years. And that's the idea you're doing there, is you're building in that time to keep at it, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe you're doing a walk, where as your kids are trying to make those decisions, maybe you built that in, but now I'm giving her the opportunity to say, I don't know what to do here. I love a kid who says, my best friend, and you know it's her, but you're building in that time to be intentional and open that door for her. I like that one. Anything else you guys thought about? Yeah.
I just like keeping the conversation open, not just like a one and done. Like growing up, I don't know if that was like true for everybody, but for us it was, don't have sex because you could get an STD or get pregnant, and then that was it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like something that you could continue to talk about. The same with like the drugs and alcohol,
Right.
keeping the conversation open.
And this is, a nice safe way, especially like late elementary, certainly junior high and high school, is talking about a friend's kid or a story in the news or something you've heard. I don't even care if you make one up. Just to kind of, especially great in the car ride, because you're not making that awkward eye contact, like, oh, scary story came about today, and kind of sharing that. That's a good way to plant seeds and open that door for your kid to feel more comfortable talking about someone else's kid or a friend or a story on the news, but yet they can get their questions and thoughts out without it being about them. Yeah, Michelle.
I spent more time snagging our son's phone. I mean, our daughter's pretty open about it, so I wasn't, as much need, but he's very, secretive. There was nothing exciting at all.
Really, this is it?
But that was, I wouldn't say it was like a commitment, but after we talked about it, I'm like, I probably should snag his phone more often. So I did grab it a few more times this week, and I was just, checking on it. Again, there was nothing exciting, but still, and he knew I was doing it. Like, he was sitting there watching me do it, so he knows.
And I like that one because, again, it can be, I'm not pretending you're me right, but it can be like, show me what you're doing. Be in it with him, have him pull it up. Who are you talking to? Who are you? Because there's a lot of conversations that can come out of it than just an I gotcha. But I love that Michelle said he knows I'm doing it. This is not a sneak and peek later. This is in it with them so that no matter what's on there, you guys are having a conversation about it. Good. Any other thoughts, comments about last week? I do want, oh yeah.
Was it last week or was it 2 weeks where you talked about the different levels of, stages of parenting?
2 weeks ago?
Is that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but that's okay. I love
Can I
it.
just share real quick? I think
Yeah.
for me, I'm seeing it more with our kids now in middle school, so 6th graders. So basically, long story short is I'm encouraging Micah, he's in Trail Life. This last troop meeting, he's a navigator, so he's in 6th grade. So he actually taught some of the younger boys, the Woodlands. So that encouragement, we prepared the plan together. He took ownership of it. I encouraged him along the way. He did a great job yesterday. And then also now, Joe Ford is doing a great job, but I think encouraging the boys and the girl, Hannah too now, for tonight, for trunk or treat. It's not about you, it's about serving others.
Oh.
And on the way here this morning, I had a conversation with Micah. Micah, why did Jesus come? He didn't come to serve, or to be served. He came to serve others. So I've been trying to focus on, now you're getting older. You still have time to go trick-or-treating, but the focus is not on you, it's on serving others as Christ did. So
And I
that's
like-
what I've been.
I love, you also have that small village. They're hearing it from Joe, they're hearing it from here,
Yes.
they're hearing it from here, and that repetition.
friends, youth
Yes,
group.
yes.
Good peer pressure.
And talk about, a moral or value that's important is that service. So
Yeah.
on my Sunday, I'm gonna talk about it, but I'm gonna also talk about it during the week, and I'm gonna talk about it here and here. I like that. Good. I kind of want to do a small apologies when we talk about kind of thoughts and comments. Michelle had a great conversation with me last week, and I just want to stand up here and make sure I have said this. When I am up here and I'm facilitating and I'm giving guidance, I want you all to know I am not a parenting expert. Even more so, I'm not a parenting expert for your kid. I want you to remember, and this gives me goosebumps, God chose you for your kids. And although that can feel very overwhelming at times, it's also exciting and empowering. You are the parents of your kids. One thing I just say in general with my background, so I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and then as a parent, is I just challenge you, and this is one of the things we're going to talk about next week. The quote I most live by is, I'm not just raising a child, but also the adult he or she will become. That's what parenting is all about. So what's hard in parenting is it's constantly thinking about, where do I want you to be? Where does God need you to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And so when you think of that skill development, that's what I want you to remember as a parent. You need to at all times think about a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. If that is a skill, a moral, a value you want your child to have, they need to practice now. And that's the hard part as a parent. I can solve this faster, I can do this faster, I can tell you the right way. But this uncomfortable, here's where I need you to be, you guys need to think about the skills, the morals, the values. If your kid is going to need that skill, moral, value, that's where our role becomes. Let them practice that, whether in the most supportive environment they will ever be. Our households, these schools, that's the tricky part. But you are the expert. There's a reason God chose you, and I want you all to remember that, okay? So take what I say with a grain of salt. Can you use it? Can you not? No hard feelings there. Okay, so this week, the lesson of the blessing. So we are going to talk about kind of your child being the blessing. And when Jim Burns refers to this, really he's talking about verbally and intentionally affirming a child's identity, worth, and purpose. That's where I get a little overwhelmed as parents. But he also says it's the practice meant to speak life into a child's heart and help build their confidence and character. And ultimately, he's going to break it into 4 parts. He's going to talk about speaking the blessing. He's going to talk about believing the blessing, being the blessing, and then last, celebrating the blessing. So just thinking for a moment, how do your kids know you love them and you are proud of them? Anybody willing to answer? Thinking of each of your kids, how do they know you love them and you are proud of them?
I think in our house it's because we tell them that all the time. You know, before we go to bed, you know, when they wake up in the morning, when they do something great, like they hear it enough from us that they would hopefully believe it.
Good. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm kind of building this reserve so that the rest of the stuff can happen, but you're building that reserve. Yeah. Yeah.
I would say each one of our children are very different, and so I've gone through like the love languages in the past, which I think is really helpful when you have young ones as well, because maybe the way that I want to be, that I would be wanting someone to show me love is not how they, you know, so like it depends on the child, but they're all very, very different. So I use that as a tool to kind of gauge what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it changes through the developmental cycle. So it's always, for me, it's always changing.
As soon as you think you figure it out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't work anymore. And I like that you highlight they're probably different, you know, so even though our oldest, this is what's working. Think for a second, if I asked each of your kids, what would their answer be? Chris probably feel pretty confident that they say, well, they tell me all the time, I know this. Any other answers out there? What might they tell me? I think to Nicole's point, you know, when I think of my 3 kids, my oldest is definitely a words. She needs to hear it. She says it all the time. It is definitely built in there. I think our second is time individually with her. She's not going to open up. She's not going to feel love. She's not going to show attention when there's like all of us around. So she's definitely more of an individual kid. But then I take my third, who he doesn't need the words ever. He needs to play ping pong. He needs to watch football. He needs to be with you, but talking is not a part of it. He knows it, but if I spend time with him, that's kind of his way. And I think Nicole kind of said it, but it's kind of that love languages. What does it look like? Anybody else have any that they know? This is what my kid would say. Yeah.
I feel like Simon, he notices when we do little things like, oh, put his art up on the wall, or I actually like screenshot it and put it as like my background scene, and he's like, that's my raccoon I made, isn't it? Wow. It just like you could see on his face, he was like, you liked it so much, you put it right there to see every day.
And kind of that proud part, right? Like, you are so proud of me. Like, yes. And there's so many art projects in here. So many. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to watch the video. It is only about 10 minutes long. We're going to watch the whole chunk, and then we're going to break it up into kind of two pieces of what we'll talk about. Good?
So I've got two more quick lessons, and these are key. One is the lesson of blessing, okay? The question is how do you bring honor and security to your home? Well, this goes back to a key lesson in confident parenting, okay? And because this is what we want to do. We want to bring security and blessing to the home. I asked 25 couples, how many of them believe that their parents actually focused on offering a blessing in a proactive, intentional manner? 2 people out of the 25. There was actually 50 people. That's it. Well, many just didn't know how to bestow or offer a blessing to their kids. Parents want to do this, but they're not sure how. So let me just give you 4 quick points on it. Speak blessing to your kids. Be proactive about this. I mean, again, the Bible says that your words have power. The Bible says that your words have the power to bless or curse. You say you'll never amount to anything, that's prophetic. It will become self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say you're an amazing person, I admire you, I'm proud, I appreciate the integrity that you have, I love you, again, that's prophetic, and that's a blessing. So you bless or curse, but speak blessing to your kids often. Also believe the blessing, okay? There's great power in belief. So when Jesus said, your name is not Simon, your name is Peter or Petros, you become the rock, he became the rock. He was believing a blessing for him. But if you've got a son who's 5'2" and he says he wants to be an NBA basketball player and he's pretty reached his growth, he's probably not going to do that. So don't do it on the outside stuff, but stay at the inside stuff. Really appreciate your integrity. You're an amazing servant. You're growing so much. I think you're so smart. You can do most anything. But encourage them that way. But you can believe the blessing for them. Okay, that's a critical and key part. And just remember, I always think back to that Simon and Peter part, that the leader of the Jerusalem church became Peter, and he had done some pretty goofy stuff. So the third part is the blessing of a role model. So be the blessing, which means be the role model, okay? I was at a Christian college. I went to a Christian college, and we had a nerdy missionary guy speak, and I'm kind of laughing because that's not what I look like. But he just opened up the talk, and I was in the back, I'll be honest with you, reading a newspaper, and he said, you're the only Jesus somebody knows. And then he said it again, you're the only Jesus somebody knows. And he said, you're the only Jesus somebody knows. He kept doing it. On the 10th time, he pointed right at me. I looked up. I was like, why is this guy doing this? And I realized it was almost as if God spoke to me, saying, you represent Jesus to a family that doesn't know him, to a lot of friends that didn't know him. And so in reality, you as a parent modeled Jesus to your kids. One time, our daughter Rebecca was praying, and she didn't always pray every night with us. We tried to pray with her, but we'd always say, do you want to pray? Sometimes as she got older, she would say, no, you guys can do it. This time she goes, yeah, I'll pray. And she said, dear Daddy. And then she goes, I mean, dear God, kind of giggling. And Kathy leans over and goes, her God looks like a bald-headed nerdy guy. So again, my point being is that, you can be the blessing as a role model as well. The Proverbs 11:14 says this, the man or woman of integrity walks securely. And I'm convinced that if you're a person of integrity, that your kids will also walk securely. Integrity, by the way, doesn't mean perfection, okay? It means being authentic and being real in front of your kids. So if you blow it, you tell them you blew it. That's integrity right there, okay? So again, kids need to see that. And then celebrate the blessing, okay? okay? Celebrate everything. Especially celebrate and acknowledge the rites of passages, birthdays, baptisms, driver's license. You know, again, we have this program called Pass It On where we celebrate a rite of passage every single year. That's a cool thing. With Kathy and the girls, age 11, that was the big year. Kathy took them to a hotel. They read a book. They bought an outfit because for girls, that's a big deal. For guys, it's probably not. They had a nice dinner, and they walked through some Christian education. They literally read a book together. At 16, first date with moi, and I let them choose where they were going to go within reason. So our kids, we live in Southern California. One went to San Diego, one went to Palm Springs, one went to Hollywood. And at that place, I then taught them it was a rite of passage, see. But we celebrated them becoming 16, and for those girls, they then got to date. But they didn't date until they dated with Dad, and we got to talk about things like the purity code, see. And then the last lesson is a critical lesson, okay? It's called generation to generation. You see, your job is to help your kids grow up to be responsible adults who love God. And here's what I say. I think there's 3 ingredients that you can help your kids with. Start young, move them till the time they're 18 and older. But it's, do they have a mission and a mate and a master? Or at least do they know how to find their mission in life? That's their purpose. Do they know how to find a mate? I'd like to choose the mates. Not going to happen. Not going to happen for you. But mission, mate, and then master. We have a phrase at Homeward that says 85% of people who make a commitment to Jesus Christ make it before age 18 or they never will. That doesn't mean that there can't be adult conversions. It simply means that those 3 issues, you could focus on those as a confident parent. That would be a big deal. So my mom, I even mentioned that my mom had passed away, and my mom was really the hero in my life, a great, great lady. And until Kathy, my wife, came along, she was by far the most influential woman. And she was moved to hospice care. She wasn't doing well, and she was in hospice. And so I was going most every day, and I would sit at her bed, and she would be in a hospice bed. Dad would be typically watching a baseball game. And one day I walked in, and Mom wasn't in bed. And, you know, they'd said she had a few weeks to go. And she was sitting up, and she said to me, Jimmy, I thought you were going to Colorado to speak. And I was supposed to speak at Colorado State, 8,000 kids. It's what I do. But I didn't want to say this, but I didn't want to go, well, Mom, I thought you were going to die. So what I had done was I had said to my good friend, I'd love to come and speak. I'm not sure I can. My mom's in hospice. And I actually asked a friend of mine who's a much better speaker than me to would he fill in? And then I said, and I have so-and-so who could fill in. They said, great, but we had him last time. We'd love to have you, but, you know, do what you can. So at this point, I said to Mom, I'm not sure. I was supposed to go tomorrow. And my dad walks in. He goes, what are you doing here? Your mom said you were going to Colorado. I said, well, I was thinking about going to Colorado, Dad. I'm not sure. And she goes, what? Dad says, well, look at her. She's sitting up. She's doing much better. I didn't really know what to say. So I come home and I tell my wife that my mom was sitting up, and my wife had seen her a couple of days before, and she just said, Jim, no, you know, she's not doing well. And I said, honestly, she is. So she said, well, let me go with you in the morning and we'll pack and let's see what happens. And, you know, you can make that decision, because my friend who was the speaker lived in Denver, and this was just in Fort Collins, not too far away. So I get there and my mom is sitting up again. And she said, Jimmy, Kathy, Jimmy, I thought you were going to Colorado. Again, I didn't want to say, well, I thought you might die. So I said, well, I'm thinking about it. And my dad walks in and goes, you need to get to Colorado. What do you think? Your mom's going to die today? She's going to be fine. You'll come back tomorrow. And I went, okay. So I gave her a kiss, and I got in the car, and we literally rushed to the airport, went there, spoke that night. And there was a light flashing in my room when I got home, and it was Kathy, and she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your mom died. Great. So I was supposed to speak that morning, but I didn't. I got out of it, and I came home. And I was sitting on the airplane, a different airplane, because I was not planning on going on that one. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me. I mean, you think of unique things when you have a death. And I thought, what were the last words my mom said? And all of a sudden, my eyes welled up with tears, because when I went to give her a kiss, literally the day before, she cupped my face and she said to me, Jimmy, I love you and I'm proud of you. She was as clear as could be, but in the hustle and bustle of it, I kind of forgot about it. And now I was sitting on that, you know, seat in that airplane, just losing it, because my mom said, I love you and I'm proud of you. Well, you know what? Those words have been wonderful for me. I was an adult. I mean, I cried off and on the whole way back home, and I grieved my mom's death, even though I knew she was with God. But by her, who had never been to a training seminar, who had never taken a course on confident parenting, but she knew innately that what you say to your kids is, I love you and I'm proud of you. And those words will be with me for the rest of my life. Those words sometimes have carried me at times where it was bad. And I want to say to you that you could dump most of what I've said. But if you can get across to your kids that you love them and you're proud of them, that's going to make a difference. By the way, God loves you and he's proud of you. Why? Not because of anything you've done, but because of who you are, his children. So no one will ever be a perfect parent. But we can't also become a more confident parent if we just live it by circumstance and chance. So become proactive, become intentional about some of the key parenting issues and lessons that we've been talking about, and your influence will last from generation to generation.
Ways for you guys, anything you want to talk about? I kind of break it up. Okay. I want you, so first, I kind of pre-gamed this with you guys, but when you think about the blessing, it being your child, keep these words in your mind. It's verbally and intentionally affirming a child's identity, worth, and purpose. The practice meant to speak life into your child's heart and help them build confidence and character. And we're going to kind of break it up into the 4 areas, and I want you to think of 2 things. First, I want you to reflect for yourself, what makes this hard? And then 2, what are you doing well? What are examples you're already using? And we'll kind of go through the 4. So first up is that speak the blessing. And I think Chris kind of talked about this one. We say it all the time. And I like that because I learned this long ago in a parenting class, but kind of that 3-to-1 rule. You need to build a reserve of I love you and I'm proud of you. I love you and I'm proud of you. Because that is how you build that relationship where later when you give some constructive criticism or some feedback or you want some growth there and you're the one responsible for giving that side of it, they already know you love them and you're proud of them, and so you've built that reserve up. But 3-to-1. This is intentionally making sure, like Chris said, every day I'm saying all these things, because every other day there's going to be these little pieces that I've got to give that other side. I like how he emphasized that this love and pride is because of who they are inside, not because of something they've done. There was kind of that Carol Dweck research a long time ago that kind of talked about don't tell your kid they're smart, because that's this innate trait. What if then they don't feel smart? And my gosh, all of us at times don't feel smart. Instead say, I love your work ethic. I love how hard you work. I love what energy you put into that. But think of those internal traits when we're speaking that blessing. What makes this hard? And what examples do you guys have in your life? Anybody willing to say what makes it hard?
No, there will be moments you're not proud of them.
Right.
They screw up big time.
Yes.
Or they're unappreciative. Or, so you have to give them the poop sandwich. I love you a lot, but
Yes.
you royally screwed that up. Here's how we're going to fix it. But I love you. It's like, that nice love bread. But, yeah.
And it's our job,
gotta
right?
go.
Yes, it is our job. And it's we are the most important person to give that other side of it. So, yeah. Nicole, were you going to add something to that? God.
She lost it at the love.
Oh my gosh, believe me, I lose it all the time.
Oh, I think I was just gonna say, listening without judgment. I have to rein myself in quite a bit. So I have to just be quiet, and it's hard, but.
Don't look at me, look at me.
It's easier to do it, like, be quiet with other people's kids, but with my own, you love them so much, you want what's best for them, and you know they have to make these mistakes, you have to ride the wave with them, and it's hard to look, sit back and be like, okay. It's difficult, it's really difficult. As they get older, the consequences are bigger, and you still have to ride the wave, and it's hard.
Yeah. Michelle and I were just talking about that before class. For anybody with little ones, oh my gosh, the time and energy they take. But there's something about as they get older that there's these bigger, heavier things that there's not an answer, a clean diaper, a bottle, a fix. And like Nicole's saying, I think as a parent, number one thing I can tell you is bite your tongue, bite your tongue, bite your tongue. Because the first time is they are junior high and high school, we start to talk, what do? They shut up, right? And that's the worst thing we can do. They're gonna give us a little nugget and kind of see how we respond. And the second we start talking, advising, fixing all of that, they're done, peace out. And so literally biting our tongue. And I like how Nicole last week, I think I brought this up, such good advice. Anytime you're sitting with your kid, sit with them in the sense that it's your kid's best friend, because we do change our role when it's somebody else's kid, right? Yes. Anything else there? Yeah.
See, I was just thinking of the second part, so because of who you are, not because of what you've done. And like something I had heard in the past was like Tim Tebow.
Yeah. Yep.
His parents always said, we never said like, they never encouraged the football aspect. They were say, I'm proud of you when somebody complimented his character, so that they knew it was about who he is, not what he's done.
Yes.
Not that you don't celebrate your kids' accomplishments, but at the same time, like putting more weight in the character.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, April, we were talking a little bit too, and what makes it difficult is when they get to that age, they're like, you don't love me, you don't care about me, and it's like, really?
Yes, you're right, I don't. And that's
You say, I love you to them, and they're like, you don't love me. I'm like,
Yeah.
fine.
And kind of like you said, we got to be the tough side of it, and that is going to be their direct response. All the more reason to have that reserve built up there. Yes. How about believing the blessing? So believing the blessing, he really emphasized, it is that inside stuff. This is that unconditional belief that you can do this. And I think here, he gave the example of if they're 5'2" and they're done growing, they're not going to be the NBA star. There's a difference between that and then again back to that inside stuff. This is where we're focusing, unconditional belief that you can be a good person, a caring person, that you can live out what God intended for you. That's the focus here. There's a quote that I have in my office that an adult's perceptions all too often become a child's reality, to kind of remind me of that unconditional belief and what it looks like for a kid. The bar, the goal, whatever that is, our belief in them is going to be pretty much the effort, the work ethic, the things they put into this thing. What makes this one hard? Having an unconditional belief in your child.
Well, I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking right now, but I think in general, this is hard for children because no matter what we say as adults, with the social media and the instant gratification that they get from whatever app or filter or whatever, that is bombarding them so much that's who they're believing the lies. And like you said, for the 3-to-1 rule, it's hard because it's coming at them all the time, and so it just makes it more difficult in that sense.
A really powerful question you can ask your kids, and this starts in elementary school. What do you think? What do you believe? That stuff coming in at them, that's their influence of what's important, and this is true, and this is a fact, and anytime you can look your kid in the eye and say, and what do you think? What do you believe? Let that turn back into this anchor you are creating throughout these years to reflect on that. They might not answer. I don't need them to answer, but I want them to pause and really think about that. If we've built that reserve, know in that fleeting moment they're not feeling it, but every time we ask that question, it helps them reflect back on that. I agree, Nicole. Anything else with the believing in your child? I think sometimes, if you said it well, these moments of frustration and, we're getting all parts of them as they're figuring life out. So I don't know that my unconditional belief was always there in the moment, being intentional with this. How about being the blessing? This is a heavy one. So me, as the role model, this is funny. Don caught an error in my notes here. But then Jim Burns still said the other one. So I don't know if it's 11, 14, or 27, but Proverbs definitely says, the man or woman of integrity walks securely. The way, kind of layman's terms, my quote is always, be who you want your child to become. Years ago, Eric Niter and I ran a Sunday school class about parenting, and the question in the series asked us to reflect if our kid is sitting across from us at 18, 20, 25 years old, and you're looking at you. Your kid is you. What things are you going to be proud of and you're glad they acquired? And what things do you kind of cringe, like, oh gosh, he or she got that from me. Not sure I'm proud of that. Be who you want your child to become is ultimately this constant role model. And I like that Jim Burns reflects that does not mean perfection. Quite the opposite. Remember, God gave us Jesus because he knew we were going to sin and make mistakes. So be who you want your child to become. A big part of that is owning up to mistakes and errors and, man, I wish I would have done this differently. And the most powerful time you can do that is in your parenting. Oops, didn't quite get that right. I'm evolving too here, and this is what we're going to do going forward. So thinking of this one, what's hard about being the blessing? And then what things are you intentionally doing there to be the blessing? Kind of show them what's hard. Yeah.
The way I think you said it, I mean, I was screwed up as everybody else. I really would prefer my children not, be as screwed up as me. So, when you're talking about being the person that you want them to be and trying to walk that walk, it's hard because
they screw up every day.
Right.
So Michelle, to that, a couple weeks ago I was going to mention this, and didn't, but it's relevant to this, where with your kids, it's one of the most powerful things. My dad was really good at it. At some point, it's extremely important to look your child in the eye and say, I blew it as a parent, and it's called closing the loop. So when you have a mistake with your child, you've got an open loop with them, and then when you sit down at the right time, when all the dust is settled, and you say, okay, so this all happened, let's close the loop, say I love you and everything, and acknowledge, myself as a father or mother, we blew it, we made a mistake, and I was wrong. And when we are with our children, unbelievably powerful what that will do in the future. So.
And man, think as a child now raising kids, the humility and empowerment that gives you of like, wait a minute, my dad messed up, so did I, and ultimately an ongoing role model.
I actually read a book many, many years ago. I don't know if you remember it, Deb. I think you read that, The Blessing. Do you remember that? And in it, it said, we don't have to be the blessing all the time. So there could be other people in the child's life, like a grandmother or a youth pastor, or there might be somebody else at that season. And so almost like we're not alone in it, and I think that takes off some of the pressure as well, because we don't have to be the blessing 24/7. We can be together with our squad and be like, okay, example is like my mom lives a couple minutes away, and she has a really good relationship with my girls, and sometimes they will talk to her about things that they won't really want to talk to me about. Like, it's like she is there for them and they know that, and so I think we don't have to put it all on ourselves all the time. And maybe your husband takes, maybe he's the blessing that week, and you're not feeling great that, So I think we have to kind of frame it in a way that we look at it realistically as well.
And I call it your village. We are not intended, God never intended us to do this alone. That's why you have church, that's why you have the Bible, that's why you have your people. And I totally agree there. Man, the amount of times I feel very blessed that I can tap my husband on the shoulder and say, and you're up. oh my gosh, to have that teamwork. And some of us aren't lucky enough to have a spouse in the house or that other person. So find other people, that grandparent, that aunt, that uncle, that coach, that teacher. We were talking about the power of an education speaking to adults because they're going to see them for 8 hours a day. How do I build this village so that they're getting it from other people as well? Yes. The last one is celebrating the blessing. So celebrating the blessing, he kind of talked through some examples, birthdays, baptisms, turning 11 in his household, 16, 18. I think the part he really emphasized here that I liked is the importance of celebrating our kids individually, time one-on-one with our kids. And that celebration isn't just the gift or the cake, it's spending time with them. What makes this hard? And then what are some examples you guys are doing? What makes it hard?
I think with the daily grind, it's hard to just find the time to do that, you know. Take one of your kids out one-on-one for dinner or whatever, like, it's just one more thing you have to cram into your schedule and stuff.
And you've got to think, other kid, wife, all those other things. Okay, who's doing all these things? Well, I could pop over here and do this. Time is the number one thing, I think. 2, I think sometimes resources, money or things like that. So how do we do it if the money part isn't there? But I agree, Chris, I think time is the hardest thing. Anybody have some other than birthdays or something special about birthdays? Like, how do you guys celebrate your blessings? Any fun things out there?
Yeah, I feel like it's not very exciting, like, to me necessarily, but he loves it. Simon's very much like a time kid. We have like a rest time that we take in the afternoons just because we don't need a break or I need to fold my laundry in silence. But sometimes I'll be like, Simon, we're going on a secret mission, and we will just like go run an errand. Like we'll just go to the library, or like we had to drop off some half-price books, and he was like, this is the greatest hour of my life. So it was doing something that I needed to do, and he just got to come along with, and he got some quiet from Sarah too, which was nice. But I feel like because I called it a secret mission, he was like, this is great. We're doing something amazing that we're not supposed to be doing right now. I don't know.
And you are more creative with it. I will tell you, raising kids, every errand I ever ran, somebody was going with me. And back to kind of that time in the car, it's stupid things I have to get done, but when we don't have time in our lives, it is a way to give that individual attention. My kids learn very quickly. It doesn't mean you get a treat or anything like that. The treat is the time with that individual child. And as they got older, I mean, they did look forward to it, but it's that alone time. I love that one. And you gotta get something done, so why not? And then leave those phones at home. So, any other creative ones? Okay, the other thing he talked about was kind of passing this on generation to generation. And he kind of brought up the word legacy. When you think of legacy, what does that mean to you? Simple terms, what's legacy?
The label on your back after you're gone.
Ooh, I really like that. Kind of like you think the athlete, just the, I really like that.
It's just what people have agreed with.
You know, when you're gone, that long-lasting impact of a person's life. So think for you, our legacy, we're going to be gone eventually, and obviously we're passing these things on to our kids. Think about that. How are you being proactive and intentional in building your family's name, that label, your last name, when you're gone? Anything anybody is doing proactively and intentionally?
I think one thing we've been doing lately is just telling stories. You know, like sharing fun family stories. Hey, when I was a kid, we did this crazy thing, or, you know, hey, Grandpa used to tell me this, or, you know, little things like that that they kind of laugh about, or it gives them something to think about.
And I think traditions are some very easy ways to kind of, this is how it used to be, and we're going to keep passing this one on. I know in the Berg household, my husband's family, they grew up in a town that only had one fast food restaurant, and they couldn't afford it, and it was Arby's. And so every year when they got their Christmas tree, that was the only time they could go to Arby's. And so they have passed this on for generations, don't even like Arby's, but every year when we go get our Christmas trees, every one of the Berg families does this. Over the years, each of the grandkids have written different essays about this. I mean, nobody gets excited about Arby's, but the fact that Arby's is tied to the Christmas tree and a tradition that's carried on, but traditions are kind of a great way, either verbally to pass it on or keep doing those things.
Missy?
Yeah.
One thing that I'd heard about 7-8 years ago, and I sent it to David and Steph who were out of the house, and then gave to Josh when he left, was, it was focused on the family or family legacy ministry, was to actually write your child a letter, a handwritten letter, and pass on the blessing from the father to the child, specifically the father. The father's not around, and the mother to the child, as how God is instructing you to do that as a father. And so when I heard this, David was already out of the house, stuff was down in South Carolina, so I wrote these out. And it was a long letter, and it was reflecting on the things we did together, and then it was formally, I as a father am passing on the blessing to you, the legacy. And it was actually something, I don't think I could have done in person with them. It was something to write and send to them. When Stephanie received hers, she opened it up and thought I was dying of cancer or something. She's like, he's got a terminal illness. She's like, oh, I read this thing twice and I didn't know what was going on. So, but to pass that on, and then when Josh just now left home, so I gave that letter to him, and I said, open this up in a week after Mom and I are gone. And so that was something really powerful, I believe it was focused on the family, that you then are passing on that legacy. So it's not easy to do because you're opening up your heart and very vulnerable in that time. So that's, to your point, that makes it hard.
I like that. One of the things Jim Burns kind of quotes is this: children generally live according to our expectations of them. Agree with that statement? Disagree with that statement? How does that feel to you? Deep questions early in the morning.
I would say I would generally agree with it, but I do know people, including myself in a few little ways, that parental expectations got pretty much tossed in the trash can because I didn't like them and I did something more or different. And I know a lot of people who have really risen above their parental expectations, like in very huge ways. So in that way I would disagree.
Yeah.
Well, I think every child or young man is unique, so we can't put our labels on them for what we want. I mean, we emulate Christ, we emulate to be a successful person, independent, have a job, get married. But that's what I'm learning, especially with my son. He's not exactly like how I was.
And you're collectively going exactly where my head, and this is why I say agree or disagree. I don't have any problems with that line. I think the part I like about that line is our job as a parent to be proactive and intentional. Think ahead. What are the 2 or 3 most important traits, values, morals that we want our kids to have? And make sure, and it should be 2 or 3, not 15, and keep going back to those. But I agree, now comes personality, other influences, maybe rising above that. It's not the this job, this sports team, this thing, it's those morals and values, and really going back to those. So I think we do need to plan ahead and think about it, but I think there's a lot of influences there, and they might be better than that. Jim Burns kind of breaks this into 3 things that he thinks we really should be proactive and intentional on. And the first one is mission. So mission, think for yourself, how are you guys being proactive and helping your kids realize a mission in life? And I'll throw some things out there just for sake of time. You know, I think for us it was, what is going to be your role at church? And getting involved there. I think it's every day I have conversations with my kids about God gave you some strengths. Remind me, what are those? How are you going to go use those? Those aren't for you just to sit back with. What is your strength? And then how can you use that in your community, in your job, in your school, in church? But really going back to that, because God made you not to sit there. God made you to serve based off of those strengths. What are your strengths? We also ask the question every day, who did you help? That's one of those values that is very important in me raising my kids. Any other ones there? The next one he talked about was mate. Think about this. How are you guys proactively, intentionally influencing who this doesn't mean we get to pick our kid's mate. This doesn't mean, I'm gonna even go so far as to say that our opinion of our mate should be the most important thing. But if we're doing this right along the way, how are you guys actively, proactively, intentionally influencing the mate your child is eventually gonna pick? What do you guys do? Plant some seeds, because I promise, yes.
I share examples of family members who may have not had a great mate and are divorced. So I just try to point out to the kiddos what Jeff and I value as in a mate. And I've shared with all three of my kids. He told me in college he wouldn't be dating me if I wasn't Lutheran. And so
that was no way, yeah.
And so I've shared with the kids just some honest truths about, what we look forward, in each other. And so, my brothers are divorced and stuff like that. So I've just shared honest truths about what was going on and kind of said, this is what you may want to look for in a future mate.
And I think the most important thing you guys can do is model what a strong relationship looks like. And again, that's not perfection, but modeling dates, affection, what you guys say to each other, how you treat each other, going to church together, small groups, Bible studies, things like that. One small thing I am going to say, I love that works for you guys. Be mindful when your kids are searching, because this is Confessions of Missy Berg. I was not Lutheran. I was not affiliated with any kind of religion, and then I married a Lutheran pastor's son, go figure. Long story short, God worked in wonderful ways through years, even leading up to me finding Matt. But that's not always a deal breaker, because I wouldn't be with him, and yet I think my faith is the strongest of any Berg right now. So just keep that in mind. Last one he talks about is that master, and this is kind of how do you keep Master, God, the center of your kid's life. And I think this is devotions, prayers, how church looks for you guys, the village you have around them. If I'm not there, who is kind of the people that are there. For sake of time, we are going to close this out. My homework for you is to commit to one component and just focus on one of those. Speak, believe, be, or celebrate. And think about something you are intentionally going to do with your kids in regards to those 4 pieces. And we'll kind of start there next week. Again, reminder, next week, I am going to do kind of the 10 phrases to live and raise kids by. This is just Missy Berg, licensed clinical professional counselor, research, and parent, not anybody expertise kind of thing. So I will close this out in prayer. I always go just a little bit too long. Here we go. Thank you, God, for guiding us in this hour of reflection, discussion, and learning. Please continue to be with us this week as we practice proactive and intentional parenting strategies that help us speak, believe, be, and celebrate the blessing in each of our kids. May we remind our kids, as you do us, that you love us because of who we are, not what we've done. In your name we pray.